Welcome to the Talent Equation podcast. Bit of housekeeping before we get started this week. This week's episode features three fantastic practitioners who are right at the coalface of bringing free play back to the child sport experience. I'm joined by Joey Peters, Debbie Saye, and Ted Kroeten. Ted, you'll know from Joy of the People, doing some fabulous work over there in the States. Joey he's got Gameplay Learn, and again, utilising a play-based model to providing football experience over in Australia. And Debbie as the chair, coach, and all-round hero of Salisbury Rovers. Again, trying to lead the charge to moving away from these formalised coaching and competition structures. And we came together, and it was a very challenging scheduling thing. One of the things I wanted to just say before we get started is there's quite a bit of background noise. Ted's based in his office, and as you might imagine, it's full of toing and froing and banging doors and squeaking hinges and children coming in and balls banging around and things like that. So you do hear a bit of that, which does have a bit of an impact on the audio quality. But I hope you will agree with me that it is worth persevering through all that for the quality of the conversation and the quality of the insights shared by the guests. So that's one thing. A couple of other quick announcements, really, public announcements. Some events are on the horizon. There is a Future of Coaching event being held at Bedford Modern School. Once again, I'm teaming up with the intrepid Juan Gonzalez Mendia from Sudamerica Coaching, and he's teamed up with the great staff over there at Bedford Modern School and have convened a group, myself, Sarah Kelleher, Richard Cheetham and Rusty and Fletch from the Magic Academy, all coming together for a day of chaos. And let's see what happens there with the learning. I have got some opportunities to provide a few discounts on the day rate, particularly for Conclave members, but also for people who are subscribers to the podcast and are subscribers on Patreon and supporters on Patreon. So stay tuned for that. And if you're not already on board, then by all means hit the become a patron button on the homepage of the website, and it'd be great to have you on board, and then I'll be able to provide you with the details of how to get there. It's on the 1st of November. It's going to last all day. We've also got some plans for Future of Coaching 2, which is the big annual event that we're doing, the 2-dayer, which is going to happen in the new year. And stay tuned again for announcements on that. I'll be sending out kind of preview announcements to the Patreon backers as well, and communicating that to everybody. So that's just one thing to everybody to be aware of, and hopefully I'll see you at one of those 2 events. And then the final bit to just mention here as well is that I've got plans for a series of different types of events coming up as well, including conversations around another Talent Equation Live up in Scotland in the new year, and again, stay tuned for that. In the meantime, I really hope you're going to enjoy this conversation. I'm walking through London, so my sound quality is somewhat compromised, not least of which by ambulances going past. But I hope you agree that this is a valuable conversation nonetheless, and I leave you with what I call the free play family.
Welcome to the Talent Equation podcast. If you are passionate about helping young people to unleash their potential and want to find ways to do that better, then you've come to the right place. The Talent Equation podcast seeks to answer the important questions facing parents, coaches, and talent developers as they try to help young people become the best they can be. This is a series of unscripted, unpolished conversations between people at the razor's edge of the talent community who are prepared to share their knowledge, experiences, and challenges in an effort to help others get better faster. Listen, reflect, and don't forget to join the discussion at thetalentequation.co.uk. Enjoy the show.
Despite every effort for technology to destroy our opportunities, and also me and my scheduling going a bit haywire. So you can hear me walking through the streets of London on my way from one train station to the next. We've managed to convene what I don't know whether it's an appropriate name, but I've called the Free Play Family, because it's a group of individuals who've all featured on a podcast before, but are committed to engaging young people and trying to bring free play back to their sports experience. So I've got Ted Kroeten, Joey Peters and Debbie Saye all on the line. We're having an experiment in audio, and we're going to see how we get on. I'm going to just, because people may not have listened to all three podcasts, I might just get everybody to do a very quick recap of kind of who they are and what they do. Let's start with Joey, all the way over from Australia in nearly the dead of night. Joey, welcome back. It's been a long time. Great to have you back on.
Thanks, Stu. Really stoked to be on here with these other guys. And, look, it's been a while, mate, and there's been a lot of things going on. Just to give you a recap, for people that don't know me, I'm a former professional footballer and played for the Matildas for 13 years. Been fondly following the Women's World Cup at the moment. In fact, I'm analysing for the Australian one of the Australian TV channels, SBS, where covering the Women's World Cup, so I'm enjoying that. I've been retired from professional football for 10 years, and I went straight into coaching. Thought I was going to be one of the next elite coaches, maybe even coach the Matildas one day, but I ended up in youth development. Basically very difficult to get into the elite space being a female in Australia, but also just the stress of it all got to me personally as well. So I ended up having a bit of time off from coaching, and then I was in a development school for about 6 years, and there I saw the light in coaching, I call it, where I found that the stresses of being too serious, and mixed that with putting a group of 10-year-old school kids in front of me, and I realised that this professional role of coaching didn't really fit with kids. And so that took me on a journey to discovering what I now call game, play, learn. And it's basically a developing philosophy, coaching philosophy, that now brings fun back to not only the kids and focusing on that, but also in coaching as well. So I'm thoroughly enjoying coaching, thoroughly enjoying meeting other coaches that are willing to do things a bit differently, like organise things like free play in your sessions. And, so I hope that kind of gives you a good intro, Stu, do you think?
That's a great intro. Thanks very much. And Ted Kroeten's on the line from Joy of the People. Ted, welcome back.
Thanks, Stu. Thanks, guys. It's really a privilege to be on with everybody. Let's see, my background, very similar to Joey's, was as a director of a giant club that I had built, and I'm a very technical guy. I wanted to develop the very best players, and I saw that as you're watching some of our high performers, there was something missing. We couldn't quite put our finger on it, and we thought, some friends of mine and I thought it's got to be free play. They're missing that sort of street basketball, pond hockey. I was a big pond hockey kid growing up, and so we're from Minnesota, where hockey is king. So we partnered with the city of St. Paul to take over a rec center, and use with the idea of this club was going to send all their kids there and become sort of a clubhouse play center. It didn't really work at all because everybody was so interested in, who's my next elite coach and who's my speed trainer and where's our next big tournament. And we just couldn't get the kids to play. It was a kind of a big failure. And I didn't want to give up on that idea. So I convinced my friends to form a nonprofit called Joy of the People, named after Garincha, who his nickname was Alegria de Povo, Joy of the People. We just thought it was a cool name that showed exactly what we wanted to accomplish. And we convinced the city to get a different rec center, right on the light rail line, right down the street from the new stadium. And with the idea of creating a ground zero of play. And we immediately saw that we needed to sort of create inviting spaces. We needed to, be like sort of a family home for kids. So things like food, water, shelter, lunches, inviting spaces like inflatable courts. We invested in some of those. We had those designed and sent over, and using different surfaces and balls, futsal, and what we saw was very important for the development of enjoyment in kids, but also we saw that there was a different learning coming together with these kids, that they played differently from the kids who were more drilled and instructed. And so we went out to look around for, okay, something's working here with free play. There's something that we didn't expect, like it actually teaches better than some kinds of coaching. What's going on? As we looked around big clubs and models, we looked for who's doing, if everybody says free play is important, so who's putting it in the curriculum of their youth development programs? And there really wasn't anybody. This is about 10 years ago. And so we had to kind of, without a blueprint, we were just off on our own, flying on our own. We had to kind of figure it out. And so it's, after 10 years we've been around, it's been really a great experience. And we saw that, free play is so important to the child's learning that now I'm convinced that there really doesn't need to be much coaching before the age of 15. If we just provide really cool environments for kids to play, to grow together, we build community and we build skillful kids, and there really is no skillful kids. There's just all kids. And some of those might choose to, go into soccer. Some might choose to go into rocket science. So we saw that the whole community together is really important. And that's kind of the big story that's brought me here. And it's really been cool to see other people around the globe, starting to, others like Debbie and Joey, that kind of grab onto this idea.
That's awesome. And a nice segue, actually, into introducing Debbie from Salisbury Rovers. Debbie, great to have you on.
Hi, thanks for inviting me to participate. First, can I just say my background is nowhere near as vaunted as either Ted or Joey, I don't think, in terms of football. But we definitely at Salisbury Rovers stand on the shoulders of giants with people like Ted and Joey going before us. So massive credit to them for the work that we do now. Just as a quick potted history as to who we are, Salisbury Rovers, of which I am club secretary, welfare officer and a coach, was launched 3 years ago. And it was very much a passion of mine to start a club where children would have a space to experiment and play, without too much adult direction. And that was based pretty much on my experience of my own son's participation in youth football. And so and perhaps my experience just as a football fan over the years as well, just there is something, I think, connecting about people of a certain age and on what we experienced watching football, even if we didn't play it. A certain liberation and freedom and players being developed without too much formal coaching. And that to me was an environment which was extremely appealing and attractive, not only just for young children to play and learn, but also as a potential football development environment. So that was 3 years ago. 3 years on, we've been our county FA's Club of the Year for the last 2 years, which is a fantastic accolation, but it would be untruthful perhaps to say that it hasn't been hard going, working in an environment which perhaps doesn't value free play. So the community aspect is really important to us, and the individual aspect as well in terms of childhood development is very important. But I'm sure we'll explore this further, but it's a kind of rocky road that we chart, really.
And I think, I'm very keen that this is, kind of a free-flowing conversation. I don't want to necessarily be the chairperson, so to speak, but as a means by which to kick the conversation off, I think there's a good starting point there, which is, we're all facing, I think, a lot of pretty culturally resilient beliefs that we are seeking to, I guess, constantly question, challenge, address, with people out there, and certainly things that Ted said earlier on, which is no coaching before the age of 15. In some quarters that would be seen as heresy, and so I'm quite keen to explore some of this, really, where these challenges that we're facing as we essentially, I guess, try to provide an experience more akin to the way children might play themselves if they didn't have any adult supervision. And so I guess, given that, Joey, you've got an important bit of work to do analysing the USA versus Lionesses soccer game this evening, and you may have to jump off before very long, I think we might start with you just to sort of kick us off in that direction, and then we can jump in with the other contributors as we go.
Yeah, so Stuart, just to kick that off, the element of free play is just so important. From one extreme we have as coaches, we want to help and instruct and find solutions for the kids and teach them how to kick the ball, how to play the game and that kind of thing. On the other end of it, if we look at, street football environments or when kids are left alone, they're then using their own resources and the resources of the environment and there are other participants there to learn. And that's why, even to throw out a bit of a discussion there in terms of letting the game be the teacher, I know that, people can get a bit offended as coaches to say, well, it's not just about the game being the teacher, but I think it's also good to, and there is a lot for us to do as, I call us facilitators. I think it's a better term than coach, because coach has so much baggage for me. But facilitator means literally it comes from the derivative facil, which is the Latin word for make easy. So we're wanting to make the process easier of learning, and it also means that we do that unobtrusively. So if we're going to be unobtrusively making the learning or just the play experience easier, then most of the time it is best if we can actually step back and allow the game to happen. That's why I love actually the phrase, the game is the teacher, because it's not just the game, but it's everyone, it's the environment, it's what play affords in terms of social connection and self-confidence. That's why I think that the power of play is there for us to try and explore more as coaches, just to literally, if we can set up the environment, and that's what I use. I love the game, play, learn framework. It's design the game let them play and watch them learn. So if we can help set up the environment, which is designing the game, then if we can literally step back and even if we just experiment a little bit with not saying anything at all, just as an experiment, don't say anything other than asking questions even. But then even then we get into trouble, don't we, with what questions we ask. So if we just stand back and actually observe, let them play and watch them learn. So if we observe, we can learn so much about this dynamic of play and the environment and the kids themselves individually and how they're connecting. So we have a lot to observe there. That's why I feel like this free play really has a magical element to us as coaches if we could embrace that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think it's potentially important to try and define what we mean by free play as well, because the purity of free play as real free play maybe can never really be achieved with adults being around. And so if we're trying to afford children an opportunity to play in any kind of original way that children would play, then as Joey says, we've got to really remove ourselves from that play dynamic and try and observe as much as possible. But I think one of the things that hits me very strongly with discussions around the importance of free play as a football development tool is that we end up in this discussion which is better. Is it free play or is it, coached football? Do children need to be coached? And it all becomes about the development of footballers, which for me misses the much broader point about free play, which is it's about childhood development. And the more you step into that play space, you're reducing those development opportunities which are really important for children to be able to play without adult intervention in a world where they are already overly scripted, overly structured, and overly adult-led. So I think there's a quote that you've used before, Stu, about free play is better than dribbling around cones and drills, but it's not much better. And I think that just sees free play as again, that kind of it's only for football development, and it misses the essential magic of free play, which is that it's a childhood experience, which is exploratory, which leads to imagination. It means children are connecting in the social world. It leads to potentially creativity, none of which you will get from dribbling around cone or from a drill. And I think there's a much broader context to the value of play in our modern culture as well, because we've reduced the opportunities to play so drastically for children. Everything is, standardized testing. They're at school. Everything is highly structured. Everything is about measurements, and free play is the antithesis of all of that, really. And so that's the broader context for me for free play. It's important for childhood development, the development of autonomy. Autonomy is not something we give to people. It's something that they have and we take away. So it allows that self-governance of the individual to flourish. So with my background is as a human rights lawyer, really, and so that's where I see the importance of play as a much more powerful tool than just in terms of football development. But I think, I don't want to babble on too long, but I think if you take all that magic and then you put it into development, then that's when you potentially got something, quite significant. So you're talking about all that freedom of expression, the potential for creativity, the potential for imagination, the potential for self-identification, for autonomy. And if you can translate that into any sport in terms of progress and keeping children in the sport and how they may evolve within the sport, then not only have you got a map for developing person before player as well, but you've got potentially better athletes at the end of the day too.
So Ted, I'd just like to get your thoughts on this as well.
Those were, there's not much I need to add. Those are two amazing answers. I wrote first Joey's idea of facilitators. I know that as soon as I say no coaching before the age of 15, there are thousands of coaches who get their heels up And I guess I don't mean it like that. I mean, and I like Joey's word of facilitators, and I wrote that down, make easy. Debbie's idea of a holistic, it's about the child. And the soccer player is inside the child. And so is the hockey player, so is the basketball player. And so the size of the child's love and brain is what we need to sort of set our goals at, and not sort of like, how we take a slap shot or how we, curl the ball around the defender. It's really, which we basically enjoy the people. We don't coach anymore. We sort of like check in with the kids. So when kids are playing, they are interacting with each other and sort of teaching each other. And what we see is there's basically two resources. Again, I come from a very technical. So when Joey says sit back and watch, I do that. It's my favorite thing to do, is go into the gym or go out to the turf field and watch the free play and just observe. What we see is there's basically two resources that we have in the game, and one is time, and one is energy. So the energy would be the calories burned, the running around the field. And whenever you have an action on a soccer field or volleyball or hockey, you want to make those actions better. Kids want to like try different ways to do it and make it better. So what is better? It's a successful action done in the least amount of time with the least amount of effort. This is an old Brazilian saying. And I think in modern coaching, when we push kids and challenge kids and we explicitly coach them, sometimes we're always push them, do it faster, do it better, do it, harder. But what we see in free play is we see the kids doing it easier. And they're always focusing on how lazy can I be to get this job done. There was my own son. He never, ever, ever played a lick of defense. So he would sit in a futsal game. He'd sit up top near the goalie and the ball would squirt out to him. He'd turn and he'd score. And he was like, I scored 16 goals today. We were at a camp and the coaches said, well, who's camper of the week? The camp was all associated with 1v1 dribbling and a lot of cone stuff. Nobody knew that this kid was my son. And they when his name came up, like, who's camper of the week, one of the coaches said, well, we can't give it to him because he never plays defense. Well, today, what has turned into a super weakness, like he didn't play defense, he tends to pop up very high up in the field. In what he was actually doing in play was figuring out areas where he could get the ball. He's like, why should I go back? The ball's going to squirt out anyways. I'm going to get into a position where I can get it and turn quickly and go to goal. And he's kept that sort of idea as he's progressed through his system and through these sort of different levels. And so today he's excellent at kind of figuring out spaces where he can receive the ball where there's a lot of pressure up high. And time and time again, play teaches in this way, that kids figure out a way that coaches could never think about. In fact, almost fight against sometimes. And in play allows kids to jump over things that adults would generally say no to. And they take risks and they sometimes fall. And I think there's a stat where kids who break their arms live 4 years longer than kids who have never broken their arm. And maybe that's because, hey, they're taking risks as young kids, like they should have. They broke their arm and they kind of figure out, okay, that's where I hold back or learn something new about how I climb this tree. And, maybe then when they're adult, they climb the tree more safely and don't fall down. But the big message I want to take is send out is coaches, your role is still there. It's still very important. You just have to think about it differently, more holistically, and as Joey and Debbie say, let them go, watch them learn as players and as people.
I think there's so much. I don't even know where to start. The first thing I'd say, though, is, I mean, one of the reasons that I was so keen to try and kind of pull this group together is, from a purely selfish perspective, it was, I knew it would be a brilliant piece of development for me, because you've reminded me already of some of the things that I've lost sight of. And Debbie's quite right to point out that I am on the record as saying several times ad nauseum about the quote from Rod Thorpe about kids doing games is better than kids doing drills, but it's not better. And that you're absolutely right, is from the lens of development, which tends to be the dominant paradigm that we're coming from. And actually, when we reframe things from the lens of experience, then it's, we don't have to consider things in that way. And so that's a very good reminder. I think the point that I wanted to make, though, is that around this idea of coaching is, and I think you're absolutely right to clarify that, Ted, is the perception of what coaching is what we need to remove ourselves from. So if we see coaching as Joey talks about, as the facilitator of an environment, and that environment being and this is why I'm so committed to the sort of ecological conceptualization of the sports experience, because it starts with environments and it starts with tasks or challenges, and then it just basically allows for exploration. And it's reconceptualizing the role of the coach as not somebody who is a knower and somebody who is responsible for instruction and telling and teaching and those kinds of words, but is somebody who is there to facilitate an experience for young people that's as close to the experience that they would facilitate for themselves as possible, whilst at the same time being there with our observational hats to support an individual should they choose to or discover something that they need some help in solving. And so I suppose that's where we're all really coming from in terms of the way we're conceptualizing how we're providing a footballing experience for young people.
I was just going to say two things. I think that's absolutely right. And I think Ted picked up on the importance of time. And I know this has been a crucial value of the gameplay learn paradigm as well. But if we can really allow children that time to develop and play, then as coaches, we can see how our tasks can transform. And I think the difficulty can be a lot of perhaps traditional coach education is about how we intervene, how we demonstrate that we're teaching, rather than understanding the dynamic of play, understanding that that's an evolutionary process. The work of Peter Gray is really instructive, I think, if you want to look at play as part of that process. And understanding how those relationships and those dynamics develop, and then seeing our role as one of assisting the individual within that. And that is a kind of scary place to be for a lot of people, because coaching can be seen as quite a scripted profession to some extent. Like a teacher, you've got your lesson plan, you deliver it, you've got your outcome, you work towards it. Whereas this is wholly, dynamic, no matter if you're sort of putting conditions in play in a game, or if it's entirely free play and child-led, you're still working with the dynamism of the game and the dynamism of the individuals interacting with the game. And that means that objectives can go out of the window. That means that you might have to change what you were doing so that you are much more child-led and child-oriented. That can change from when children are really young to, the oldest that we've got is under 15s. But even my under 15s, I had some boys last night that, they chose the game that they wanted to do. They also invented a game that they wanted to play. And they totally were able to tell me what they thought the games were going to bring out in terms of football objectives. They were able to review them afterwards and say, well, actually it did X, Y, and Z, but it also did A, B, and C. And so it's a wholly dynamic process, and that's not free play. But that's where they are and that's what they enjoy at the moment. So there's always that sense of, can you facilitate that development as you go? Because it's not about us and it's not about our personal objectives, it's about them. For me, the fundamental thing of any kind of sports development is you can never give the motivation to play and develop to a child. That comes from within. And so what we're trying to do is bring that out. And if they love the game, if they're having fun playing the game, if they feel ownership of the game and they feel their personality develop within the game, much more likely they'll be in the game. And it's much more likely they'll reach the potential within the game as well.
That's good, Deb. Just to keep going with that, the sense of facilitating and, we talk often about it's not about us, it's about them. And I've been on an interesting journey. Remember, Deb, Matty O'Neill in our little Game Play Learn community was talking about, well, actually it is about us, Joey, as well. And he was saying that it's, so once we can give over that, or not give over, isn't it, Deb? We can't give autonomy, but not take it away. So we're establishing that it is this whole experience is for the participants. It's not for us as coaches to be put on a great coaching session. Once we can get beyond our own ego and also, even that good intention of helping, how am I best to help? Well, I know that the most help I can give is probably to actually walk away. But the next probably best thing would be to then come in and, facilitate or try and help in terms of saying, okay, what do you guys want to do? And so you become still, they are the owners of the experience, but you're literally coming in and saying, okay, well, what do you want to do? So you've got all these little individuals that want to do certain things. So it's about bringing them together. That's why I believe that this is not only for kids as well. This is a really great approach for professional teams, and even my world at the moment being the Women's World Cup context and professional, team performance context. I see, as a coach now, I would just, imagine myself, and I'm seeing, people like Phil Neville, how do they facilitate their team? And you really can see that if you can get the best out of each individual, find out what would you like to do, whether it's for training, whether it's for how would you like to play, or how would you see the team playing. You've got all these individuals that you want to try and get to know them as much as possible. And each individual, if you know what they want, what they need, then you can bring all those individuals together, which becomes the really difficult part of collaborating with everyone. And I feel like, getting back to where I started, we can be the observer of the experience and we can walk away, but we can also be there, and we can even go to the extent of joining in and being a participant. So I don't know if you've talked much about, as coaches, even joining in the experience and playing with the kids. I wouldn't necessarily play with the professional athletes, but, there's a chance to actually engage, in relationship. And as much as it's not about us, it's about them, we can still play a part in being someone there that's the safe person that, is interested in them as a person and that can connect with them and that can actually enjoy the experience as well. You can even, it's wonderful to play with little kids. It's amazing. And then you come in on their level as well. So again, it's not just like I'm standing on the sideline here and I'm running the show. If you actually can humble yourself and join in as a participant, then you're really telling those participants there, I'm a learner just like you. And I think that's a powerful thing that we can come, rather than being the leader as such, to a learner as well. And I think that creates just a whole nother dynamic in bringing out self-confidence and the capabilities of the people you're working with.
Can I jump in, Stu?
Yeah, go right ahead, Ted.
So excellent points, both. And I think piggybacking on Joey, I see all free. We went to look at free play soccer spaces in Brazil and around the world, and we saw that they all were very similar. They were all small-sided, a lot of times fenced in, even netted on the top, so the ball stayed close, stayed around. They had fast surfaces. They tended not to be grass. It was like dirt or futsal. They had bigger goals so that generally when you play, adults play, for instance, they always want to play small goals. Nobody wants to play goalie, but these had bigger goals, so someone had to play goalie. They had balls that worked for that space, so they were futsal or low bounce balls. But they also had two things that were very, very interesting. One was almost all of them had bleachers. Why are there bleachers here on this? What's the importance of this? And they also had leaders, like an old man who went around and told people not to spit gum on the free play court, or distributed the rules, or like a young leader that was there. And I'll get to the bleachers in a second, but the leader part is really interesting because, as Joey said, we were looking at free play, how do we, what are the attributes? What do we do? What's missing in this environment? We're seeing this, we're not seeing that. And what we saw was sometimes when we stepped out of the room, the game would disintegrate, or it would break down or not sustain itself. And when I was a kid and I loved to play pond hockey, and we had this nice park. We were landlocked. We were everybody showed up there, and then all we did was play hockey. Then one day, my friend's dad drove up and said, "Who wants to go play for the travel team?" Because they just, these indoor rinks were popping up, and these travel clubs were happening. So my three best friends left, and I was looking at, and they never really came back to the pond. And I may have told this story before, but I looked at the kids left on the park. It was like these, 7 and 8 year olds with helmets and these skates that were flopped out. You know what I mean? They had weak ankles. They're and I'm okay, I have to make a game with these guys, So what I had to do, I was 12, they were 8. I had to okay, you stand up on top of your skates. Yeah, it seems weird. You hold your stick like this, and then, okay, let me take on everybody. And so I very selfishly set up the game so that I could enjoy the play, and I helped coach these kids up. And within a couple months, I was having fun with these kids, and they were showing up at the park, and they were getting better and better. And I think what they saw was an older kid who was selfishly setting the game up for themselves so that they could see that, hey, when I'm older, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, teach some kids, and I'm going to keep this as a self-sustaining environment. And I think when free play died, and it's dying around the world, it's when the leaders stepped out and stopped setting up games for themselves. So often when we as coaches facilitate games, we have to really look at, okay, how are we facilitating that game so that the kids don't see that it's all about us facilitating the game. So we've tried to incorporate the older kids here, Joy the People, to go in and play with the little kids and don't patronize them. Actually act like you want to try to get something out of it for yourself. And so I think this is Joey hit on a really key point, is that the game is not about, the kids can't perceive it as teaching. It's just about fun, and everybody has to have fun, including, most importantly, the most important person at that hockey rink was me. And I was being selfish, but I wanted to play. Because when I played, I had fun and I was learning the game. And I think we have to always remember this, when we look at free play and we try to understand it. And I think there's a lot more to understand, but it's certainly better, Stuart, I can't believe you said that, than dribbling to Konzenbach.
Yeah, I mean, I was quoting someone else. I'm a pain to say. But I think the point is when you look at it from the point of his point was he was coming from the paradigm of teaching games for understanding, which was a very much a PE, physical education standpoint. And
sure.
From that perspective, you can kind of understand that. I have come to move a bit beyond that idea. And I think the reason people say that is the idea of if all you do is just literally stand back and say, right, kids, off you go, then it's still got massive value. It's still got huge amount of value. But in terms of skill development, it may or may not. You don't know what might happen there. The point being is that the idea is, certainly from a kind of constraints-led approach or whatever it might be, is that it's suggesting there that maybe we can, without being explicit, without being invasive, without necessarily getting involved with instructions or anything like that, or telling anybody what to do, what if we were to make some subtle, clever manipulations to rules, tasks, space, etc., which allows individuals different things to explore? And so from my perspective, I suppose where I'm trying to navigate is to stay true to free play as much as I can. But also just try to keep a little lens on what can I do that might help somebody see something maybe that might help them here or something along those lines. So I guess that's what I'm trying to explore with it.
Yeah, exactly. That's perfect.
And I think that line as to the free play and that conditioned learning approach, constraints-led approach, is it evolves as children develop as well. So I mentioned the older boys that I had a session with yesterday, and they very much understand that approach in a sense. So they will often say, shall we change this game now? How can we change it? Should we change the players? Should we change the shape of the pitch? Should we change the number of goals? Because they're trying to bring out something specific that they wanted to look at, and they'll do that themselves. So even if you're working in a more structured way, there's always a way to retain that ownership of the game, which is so critical to that learning experience. I think where the crux of the issue can sometimes be, for me, is those really early years where children are very quickly put into, teams, and they're in, kids in kits in teams in leagues, and people don't like that when I say it sometimes, but because there's a lot riding on it in the system, because that's the system that we've got in youth football, that children join a team and 5-a-side at 6 or 7. And everything is geared up towards that match day experience, and that inevitably loses quite an important experience of just non-directed play for me. We had a session, Ted was talking about older children being involved, and we had a session recently where we have older players, under 14 players, come along and help with the younger players. And we had this magic ball, which was just an inflatable beach ball, which was silver, and it had like sequins in it. And the older boys were playing with the younger children. They were 5 or 6, and we were throwing it around, and we were playing tag with it, and everyone was having loads of fun. But I just know that there will be some adults watching saying, what is that about? That's got nothing to do with football, and that's got nothing to do with what I experience football as and what I see football as, which is, a team being trained for a match on a Sunday. And I think even though you can move towards more structure as the players and children get older, those really fundamental early play experience are really being lost in our system. And we talk about, with coaching education and coaching courses, trying to give that back, making it play-based, but not actual play in the sense. There's always got to be an objective. There's always got to be a reason for adults setting outcomes and measuring that play. And on a broader point for that, if you're looking at the cultural context for children learning, again, it's that, we've got school settings that are constantly tested, and for me, we've ended up with a football youth environment in which children are constantly tested, and the match day is that, and there's a a sort of impression that it's all about linear development, that you will train, that you will play, you will be in a match that will test how well you are doing. If you win, you're doing well. If you're not winning, it's probably everybody else's fault, so you can move to a different team which is winning. And then, you know, you've got this kind of whole perception of what youth football is about, which has got very, very little to do with play. And that, for me, is one of the most damaging aspects of what we face in trying to advocate free play. You know, people might argue if they're under 14s or under 15s, they might need something more. But to sort of suggest that 5-year-olds or 6-year-olds need anything resembling formal coaching, it is, to me, I can't see any evidence justifying people getting involved in that experience at such a young age. But that is the system that we've got.
I've got to say, on the back of that, Deb, that's why I love your work, because you're saying that we have this system and this is what people are expecting, but you're providing an alternative, and that's what, and even Joy the People, and what perhaps we're trying to do is prove that there is alternatives to what's currently there, and it's powerful. So I just think, I just wanted to give you a big rap, Deb, because you're doing a great job with all that. What I do love too, going back to what you said, was the choice, the power that again, we can't give autonomy. I love that, what you've said. We can't give autonomy, we take it away. So preserving autonomy, for me, is one of the most powerful things we should be concentrating on in sport, because especially for kids sport, we are competing now with technology. We're competing with gaming and social media. So, and what's the hook in for those things for kids? It's the autonomy and it's the relatedness. So if we look at, and Stu, you know, I love the self-determination theory. It's one of the underpinning most important theories that I just keep coming back to in our practices as coaches. But we often focus, and what I appreciate you, Stu, is about the importance of skill development, and it's an amazing. I love it. You know, how do we design the most amazing game that we can get a lot more, you know, these affordances for kids to develop their skills. But I feel like it's overtaking the importance of the other two aspects, if we say in the self-determination theory. So if you have competencies, if you have autonomy, and if you have relatedness, then that kind of comes out, then intrinsic motivation or a love of the game comes from those three particular dynamics coming together within an experience for an individual. So I feel like we're just focusing probably, I'd love to put it out there. Are we focusing too much on competencies rather than actually saying, well, actually we need to focus on this autonomy in our sessions? So that means we do need to give choice to kids. So I know from my perspective, and we also need to uphold relatedness. So we need to uphold the social aspects, that sometimes we need to forego competency. So I know for games, like I usually give a choice to the kids. Oh, would you like to play, because I love playing multi-ball, which is basically football or whatever game you have, play it with more than one ball. So automatically you are getting a better ratio somewhat of interactions with the ball. So with futsal, you know, rather than one ball between 10 players, if we played multi-ball with 2 or 3 balls, and some of the kids love playing, oh, let's play. Do you want to have another ball? Yes. Okay, let's go 3 balls. And so it becomes a ratio of what? 1 ball between 3, and there becomes like these 2v1 little overload interactions. The game splits. The kids are, which ball is closest to me? They start all these perceptual demands. And I'm just going, oh, wow, the skill competencies in this particular game is amazing. I wish they could play it all the time. But then when I ask them, sometimes they'll be like, nah, I just want to play with 1 ball. And I'm like thinking inside, oh, damn it, and just lost, that opportunity for
competencies to be developed. But really, the power that we've just given to, or again, that we've kept in place, that autonomy. No, I respect, this is your game. What do you want to play? I just want to play one ball. Okay, well then go and play one ball. And that becomes more important, and the relatedness becomes more important than the skill competencies. What do you think, Stu?
I totally listen. When there's no surprise, we're all going to be in violent agreement with each other, isn't it? But your point about I think you're right. That everything's been focused on competence. Everything's focused on improvement at all costs. Sorry, Joe. Yeah, go on. Jump in, Ted.
Stuart. So, I'm big into self-determination theory as well. So when Joey, I just want to dovetail on this because I believe kids, if given free choice, would pick up play. They would pick play. I think if parents and systems modeled it to have better, kids would pick play. And for the reasons that Joey went over. One, it's their own choice. It's autonomous. Two, they get to be with their friends. This is so important. And this is something that we've lost. And these three things are all fitted together, and competencies. And I believe that when we're talking competencies and we're talking play, that means that, every game is a little bit different. And some build competencies in other areas where others build competencies in some other areas. So when you're playing futsal with 3 balls, you're building on the ball and direct competencies that relate to 1v1s, 2v2s, 2v1s, etc. When you play with 1 ball, you're building competencies away from the ball. Where do I move? How do I balance? Those kind of things. I think that's where the importance of designing really cool games comes in. I believe that kids love free play, and here they break down the doors when free play starts here, is because they understand it builds competencies, especially compared to sort of their more traditional club methods of everybody in a big dome. Here we play in domes in the winter, and they put their shoes on, they go play, they take their shoes off, they leave. And they understand. And watching the kids here play in a very messy, sometimes sloppy, low-level style, and then watching them go play in high school games, we could observe the sort of JOTP kids, the Joy of the People kids, versus the kids who were more club, sometimes Cover-esque driven. Cover is a very cone-orientated, isolated skill training. And what you saw, it's plain to see, is that the kids who grew up in free play have more of a beginning, middle, and end to their play. So when they get the ball, you can see they have an idea, and then they want to do here, they want to pass it here or shoot on goal, or here's what they want to create. And it's very much more difficult to see the contextual meaning of a player who doesn't grow up like that. What did they mean to do here? So I believe, going back to self-determination theory, that kids love free play because it does build competencies, especially compared to, and I believe that the coaches understand this, and their sort of model is, you are an elite player now, right? You're an elite player now, so you should be, so we've built these competencies in you, therefore you should choose, be autonomous, to go work on your own and go play with others, and your new friends are now your friends because they're all, like you. And meanwhile, we've left our friends behind. We really haven't given the kids a choice. And it's questionable whether these coach-led competencies are actually better than the competencies of a free play environment.
And yes, and just to expand on that a little bit, the idea of competence, I think, is based on a misunderstanding of what the competence is. So I'll just expand on that a little bit from the perspective of skill. So if we're talking about competence from the perspective of skill, Well, the assumption that the entire industry is basing this on is that skill is the aggregation of technique then applied in context, so done in a linear way. We work on techniques, and when we get them, we aggregate them together, we build them together, we put them into some kind of a context, and then you're good to go. And it fundamentally misunderstands the idea that skill is something that requires context to actually develop. So you can't separate skill from context. You're not developing skill if you're just developing technique in isolation. So the idea is that we need to have a context from which there are problems that we then need to try and solve, and then that is how skill develops, and through an experiential learning model. And because very few individuals can understand and conceptualize the idea that context and skill need to be inextricably linked, it is absolutely, completely against any idea they've got of the way competence might emerge, in the idea that a free play environment might enable competence. But fundamentally also, what we're not doing is we're not looking at the right kind of competence. So what are we looking for? So the fundamental challenge that we're facing here is that the competence that people are looking for is a technical competence. They want young people who can do stuff. They can do technical stuff that looks good. It's very obvious. It's very in front of everybody. It's very pretty. I'm not interested in any of that. I'd rather have a group of children who aren't that technically competent, but have a deep appreciation of some of the problems that the game is presenting for them. And I like to think that we're all, if you like, at the coalface of doing live experiments on an ongoing basis to see whether this hypothesis that we all have around the way skill can emerge through a non-explicit model. And I like to just report back on this. And from an autonomy perspective, what's really interesting is it's interesting how children, what they choose. So, for example, as a cricket coach, I recently said, right, here's some game forms we can play. Which one do you want? And they all said, and I fully expected them to choose a game form where you basically get a series of lives. You get, if you make a mistake and you get out, you get another go. And I thought they'd go for that. No, they went, nope, if you're out, you're out. We want to play real cricket. I went, you sure? Yep. Let's have a vote of hands. Most of the kids put their hands up. Okay, that's what we'll go for. And then the first kid came in, got out first ball, and went off crying. So I have to sometimes get into a bit of a frame of mind of saying, right, so autonomy can sometimes be dangerous because, they can equally sometimes make some less informed choices. So afterwards, we played it and we went through it. And afterwards, I then said, right, so quite a few people here didn't have that good a time because they sort of got out first ball. Do you think it would have been better if we played with a few lives? They went, yeah. So next time, should we play with a few lives? Yeah, I think we probably will. Okay, great. But at least I didn't step in, which was every aspect was screaming at me to do, which was to sort of go, no, guys, you really don't want that. You want something else because it'll be better for you. I didn't. And I think they then now have arrived at that decision for themselves. But I can't tell you how hard it was for me not to do that.
We had a really similar experience recently at the club where the children, we had kind of basically free play June. So it's entirely free play for the sessions on a Saturday morning, and our probably most vocal group are our under 9s and under 10s, exuberant, confident bunch who will tell you exactly what they want to do. And they wanted, in the middle of a session, we had like small-sided games tournament to do a big match. So it was, on a 7-a-side pitch, there's probably 10 aside. I looked at it and thought, oh my God, what are we doing here? And said to the coach on the pitch, it's like, what's going on? Listen, it's 10v10 on a 7v7 pitch. This is like antithetical to everything we do in terms of small-sided games. He said it's their choice. And, so we went with it. And I think some of those children afterwards would probably said, you know what, I prefer a small-sided game on a smaller pitch, but some of them love the big game. It's their experience, and they will learn from that experience, and they'll take away different things as well. And that's the thing about autonomy, and we can talk about self-determination theory. It's very explicit about what that means. But from a broader perspective of human development and of human rights, and children have them too, each human being has the right to self-determination So that's something that's fundamental to us. Our autonomy and our right to self-governance is something which is, there's some things which are inalienable. And so that does have a part to play in play as well. And that means making uninformed or wrong choices, as we would see them as adults.
Mm-hmm. But we do have a responsibility, though, to step in there, though, don't we? I mean, I totally agree with you, but children aren't always able to make the informed choices that safeguard the safety of others.
We're talking you're talking choices about whether or not they're out in a game. We're not talking safeguarding issues. We're not talking about off a 6-foot wall. We're talking about, within the parameters of safety, children being allowed to express themselves. And so there is always with children's rights between paternalism and our duty to be able to protect children as well, which actually we don't always do that well in sport, because we are very, very of what is effective, from my point of view, sometimes abuse of children with verbal screaming at them on the pitches. So that's all right. But when we get to free play, it's suddenly there's a safeguarding or safety issue. Sometimes people say, well, children will manage. If there are a lot of them on a pitch, they won't really come to any harm. And they'll manage even if they're out in a game and they might get upset. They'll live. But they're experiences that they choose for themselves and they can potentially learn from. But coming back to something that Ted said before about free play and that children choosing that, I do believe that children do. What I do think is that they're reflections of their culture as well, and that we have had experiences, and I would be interested in what other people say about this. 2 things have come out. Parents will say, free play is all right for those children who are very good at football. So for the elite footballer, as they would see it, for an elite 10-year-old, that's okay to in an academy to let them play street football because they've got all the technique already and they can really express it. But it's not all right for those children that want to learn something. And the second that they will say, and I have had parents say this, and that my child says, I need to be directed by a coach. I need a coach to tell me what to do. And that particularly happens sometimes after children have been exposed to competition, like a tournament or a match, where afterwards they may reflect on it and feel that they lost and want an explanation for that. And sometimes then I need more direction. The reason that I lost was because you didn't tell me what to do, like all the other coaches are telling their children what to do. So we don't operate in isolation. We operate in a context, and the context is adult-led and adult-directed. And so I think we've had experience, certainly, of it not being the case that children would say, I just want to play, I just want to play free play. It's transactional. I've come here, you teach me how to get better. And I just wondered what Joey and Ted's experience was of that as well, really.
So free play, I think one of the things that we've come to understand is free play is not fair. It's not fair for every kid. It can be inefficient. It's very evolutionary in that respect, where it's a slow process, and some kids will pick it up quickly, and some kids will be much slower. And it's different for boys, it's different for girls, it's different for everybody. And I think when you add in, just as Debbie said, when you add in competition and then you add sort of outside viewing of the problem, you see, we need to solve this problem for the kid because they're frustrated, they're not doing much, we need a speed trainer, we need to teach them passing or how to do a Cruyff turn. Enjoyment is the first skill. Sometimes we set up games that are too far ahead and competitions too far ahead of what that kid is likely to. There's an older kid here. He is going to go to college next year. He's going to a good college. But he took about 4 or 5 years off of this Joy of the People model and went to play club. Now he's, 18, 17 years old, and he still dribbles too much. He's doing the things that he probably should have done when he was 9-10, but he still has to get that out of his system. And so, but he's playing alongside people who are like, hey, dude, you got to, pass the ball. And so he needs to figure that part out. But what we've discovered is because there's all these different levels, what we've done here is, we'll have 4 or 5 different games going on where kids can choose. If they're not into the competitive futsal game, they can go to the street tennis or soccer tennis game, or they can go into the one court where they play World Cup, where they don't really get eliminated. Like in Stewart's example, they don't get eliminated. They kind of continue to play. So they have different cooperative to competitive steps that they can take as they sort of teach themselves. So, but what we see is that I've used this idea before. I believe play is a language, and there's an acquisition period, and that acquisition period is about the just joy of the language and of the play, and output. The skills are not important. Input is important. What are they seeing, doing, what's around them? And eventually they'll be able to learn how to talk. They'll be able to learn how to express themselves, but we have to give them time. And that time and patience, especially when it's a transactional environment, when parents are paying for what they think are traditional skill development, is a difficult tightrope to walk. I think if you give it plenty of time and space and you educate the parents, you can, Debbie and Joey and all those people around the world that are kind of in this task of building free play, if we stay true to that, I think we'll make some big steps.
Joey, step in.
Yeah, I might just have to finish up here, guys. But I really hope that you keep going, please, because I'm jotting down a lot of notes here. It's brilliant. But yeah, I guess if I could finish up by just perhaps giving it a few challenges to coaches out there. Just really hope that some people can give free play a go, and what I suggest, usually with Gameplay Learn as well, is an introduction to free play would be just to, if you haven't tried it before with your team, I found it easiest, or a good way of doing it is either at the beginning or the end of the sessions. But usually at the beginning, it's really interesting if you can set up, and you might just set up your environment. I mean, it's wonderful, those inflatable pitches that you guys have got. I think they're just amazing. But if you can just set up, your area with goals, a variety of balls. I mean, I love putting 4 goals out because I think the value of the 4-goal game is amazing. But if you just set the little area up, and then when the kids or your players start to come, and just kind of either talk with parents, you can use that time for, or just kind of deliberately stand back and observe what happens. What do they do? Do they stand and wait for an instruction, or do they automatically go to the balls? Do they start taking shots? Do they start interacting with each other? So there's a lot to observe there, and it's an easy way to just, I encourage people just to try it out, that free sense of free play. And 2 more things, I hope it's okay, guys, but this other thing as well, to explore autonomy more for coaches. So giving your players choice. So whether it's just start off by, you might have 2 different games planned, and either one, it's a win-win. Whatever the kids choose, you're going to be comfortable in yourself to be able to know that, yep, this is a good game they're going to play, even if you're not used to it. But just try and give them choice. And because in the end, what we're trying to draw out is this intrinsic motivation. It's the love of the game. Because if we can breed the love of the game in kids, and I'm saying all players now, like I said, I'm in the performance context at the moment, but I feel like if we do it with kids, how much more easier should it actually be with adults to be able to facilitate choice and trust that, they're adults, or at that level, that they're going to be able to know
what's a good choice to make in terms of what we want to do. So my third challenge would also be for performance contact coaches to also try free play as well. So you might just set up the environment, or you really let the players lead a part of the session, or just let them play and you observe. So I might just have to leave it there, guys, but I hope that somewhat helps. Do you think, Stu?
Yeah, Joey, that's fantastic. And thank you for taking the time out. I know it's a challenging scenario with all our time zones and everything else, and we've still got work to do. So all the best for this evening, and I hope it all goes well.
Appreciate that. And see you guys. So it's interesting. It's England versus USA. So who's
Lionesses?
Yeah, so what do you guys, are you sending me a case of, what are you guys, bangers? What is something new food if you guys, when we win today?
Wow. Wow, it's on. I love both the teams. I just got to say, I love what's happening with women's football around the world, especially the USA and England. Wow.
So
we're in for a big
I have
one,
a quick.
guys.
Okay. Bye, Joy.
Hi, Joey.
See you.
So, Stuart, I have a question. We've seen that free play is different for girls than boys, and around the world, there's a lot of boys playing free play. In other countries, in South America, in good environments, but not as many girls. And but what we have seen is when those girls get to higher levels where they're playing with high school or club, that they look very different than their counterparts. And I'm just wondering if Debbie has any insights from what she's seen with the girls that are participating.
Not specifically, I don't think. We've recently just started a series of girls' sessions. We had a series of sessions going on last year, and they've been relaunched this summer. I know that they are specifically led, so that I haven't done them myself, but according to the coaches, the children do the same thing that the boys would do, which is, decide what they're going to play it and get on and play it. The challenge that we have is that, is numbers really in attracting girls to the sport. I know that other areas have been very successful with that. That's not something that's come easily in our area, but I haven't really experienced any difference, I have to say, between genders in relation to free play.
I think I've definitely had some experiences of that, which is more about the approach to the game, which is in general I've found, and this I think there is an exploratory willingness and a risk taking that boys seem to just thrive and revel in, and some of that's driven by them finding their kind of position within their social group, I suppose, and there's that element of wanting to outdo each other or to show each other what they're capable of doing, whereas I've certainly seen girls, and again I'm generalizing, but more driven by the idea of I guess social acceptance, and so doing things in a much more collaborative way, not as competitive, directly competitive. So it's about, again, it comes back to an approach, and but I can't say that that's an exact science. That's just, I think, a theme that I've seen a little bit of emerging through experience.
Our goal is to get 50% girls and 50% boys one day. We're not there, but in the suburban clubs on the outsides of the cities where there's more organization money. There's higher levels. There's more girls playing than boys, actually. In the inner city clubs, there's less girls than boys. So we're always trying to grow that. But I think the what I see is exactly what you said. They enjoy the more cooperative games, but it's just a different approach. I think there are girls that can't wait to play with the boys. And when I ask them, do you guys want to play separate? Do you want to be on your own team to play in the tournament? Do you want to go mix with the boys? A lot of times it's their choice, and often they'll play with the boys.
Yeah.
And we always have to be careful, I think, about again, context, isn't it? And that children who come to the club are contextual beings and live in a society where we have gender roles, and even though they're less dominant perhaps than they used to be, there is still a kind of perception of a way a girl should behave, the way the boy should behave. Perhaps that is compounded in some instances when they're left in free play, because maybe they fall back onto those roles, or they try and find a way of identifying themselves within roles that they understand and acknowledge. So it's difficult to sort of say there's something intrinsic about the way girls play as opposed to maybe the way they've been socialised to play.
Yes. There's an interesting dynamic here, I think, which is around. I don't know whether it's necessary. It's certainly not necessarily you're right. I think, again, going back to the way that children reflect society. So there is that aspect of socialization. There is that aspect of, are they reflecting what their expectations are and the expectations that's put on by either parents or schools or whatever it might be. But essentially, one of the things that I'm very attracted to by the concept of free play, or an ecological conceptualization for sports experience, is it opens up opportunity for individuals to come at the activity in their own way. Yeah. And it's very individualized, regardless of gender. So if a girl says, no, I want to play with the boys because that's what I enjoy. And if a boy says, actually, I'd rather go and do that game over there that the girls are playing, and it doesn't often happen, sadly, but I think it ought to happen more. But in that scenario, that is totally fine. But when you get down the formal competitive space, that's taken away. That's not possible anymore, because
correct.
We have to create an environment where it's fair and everything has to be done by ages. I mean, that's one of the things I really like about free play, Ted, is you have different ages playing together, and that affords different experiences and different challenges.
The big two surprising findings that I believe is that one is that if you try to do free play to get better, like if kids come here, we've heard there's these great free play games and it doesn't cost anything, and we're gonna, we play for an elite club and it's good for us to go do free play because the coach said we should do free play. It doesn't really work, because in their mind they're not. You have to let go. It's almost Zen-like. The music's on, the kids are, they know each other. They're all friends. They're trying stuff. They're doing really well. The kids who are too concerned about competition, about performance, and about comparison, find themselves in a state of fit and it's almost this growth mindset idea where they're just, or fixed mindset where they're afraid to take risk and show something that they might want to, we really see like a real protection of their sort of ability. The kids, you have to let go of the idea of performance in order for that performance to really grow inside of you. The other thing is that elite kids, if we separate what we would call the elite kids, we like to say there's no good, there's no bad. But if you separate the elite kids from the environment and put them all together, it doesn't really work. That the only way to build the elite kids is to keep them all together. And there's something very powerful about playing with your friends, and about the ability to make new friends, and about the ability to stand up for what that friend is learning, which might be, from a skilled competency setup, far from what you're expecting. But it's their own, like Debbie said, it's their own choice. And we need to, protect that environment. And sort of, our goal has always been, it's like, we need to show that this really works, that this is really the best practice. And maybe all this hyper in the United States, soccer is a $5 billion industry, youth soccer. And it's crazy. I was just in Kansas City where they had, 13 turf fields set up for tournaments and for, it's just crazy, this business of you have to stay in the hotels that they tell you to stay in. And if we can just show people, hey, you don't need to join the elite clubs. If you bring kids together and create friendships, they'll grow in their skills to a very surprising new way. And they'll change the way we think about, and I'm telling you, the kids who are playing for girls is a little bit different, because a lot of these girls for the U.S., they grew up in it's hard for them to miss. And this is, I think, but in the guys' game, you see that a lot of the high performers spent lots and lots of time with their friends in a great acquisition environment. And that kind of drove them forward. I think Megan Rapinoe said that when she grew up, she did a ton of unstructured play with the boys a lot. And you can see that as she plays. There's sort of a context to her game that you don't really see with a lot of the other U.S. girls, women.
Yeah. I think that really, really important point, actually, Ted, and I really strikes a chord with me, both of the things that you said there. Firstly, in terms of that Zen-like feeling of really just playing, really embracing free play, rather than saying, oh, this has got some objective, I'm going to participate in free play because it's going to do me good. What I've noticed with our older boys who come from that free play background and they're moving towards more formalised football is if we get too formal, if we get too structured and too coached, they take away something really powerful in terms of their play and their own sense of enjoyment through their play. So, and that really reflects itself on the pitch as well. So they're kind of laden down with a fear of failure all of a sudden, and then they can't do those things which would naturally come to them, those decisions that they would make to take risks. And so it's trying to transcend that kind of barrier, I suppose, between free play and more structured football. If they, their boys are entering a league next year, so they're, it's score lines and everything else, and it's going to be much more competitive and tough for them. But it's keeping that fire of fun and enjoyment and love for the game and the beauty really that comes with that autonomy and decision making and risk taking, which in patches they'll play football that I don't see from anybody else because other teams maybe don't have that background of free play, and it's keeping that alive as they play. And I think the second really, really important thing that you said there as well was about that collaboration between children of really different development levels. We very much are inclusive throughout our age ranges so that we don't embrace this idea which is predominant in youth sports culture of the best need to play with the best, and so they have to be kind of weeded off and put into special clubs, and so they can only play with other really good people of their age groups decided by somebody else. And what we've seen is that whole range of skills that's developed by the children who are developmentally at a higher level or maybe sometimes have played more, have got more experience of the game or more confidence sometimes, is that they start to develop things, aspects of their personality and play, which are still extremely important and which would be missed in a best with the best environment, perhaps. So leadership, leading by example, leading vocally, adding to the discussion, restructuring the game while the game's going on because they know what's going wrong. And, so they're really given powerful opportunities to extend their own experiences. So I'm, really passionately support what you say there in terms of keeping children together. And even people who are just new to the game, we've got boys who are starting playing, at 14. They've never really played any form of football before, kicked a ball about. And they're brought on really dramatically quickly by the others. So they're in a learning context in which exposed to lots of different people and at different development levels. And I really think that benefits everybody.
I see. Go on, Ted. Sorry.
So this is a big passion of mine. If you take a U14 team in the United States, in Minnesota, a top team, and play, oftentimes they don't even play home games here. They have to go travel to Chicago in order to play what they call a team that's good enough for them. Now, they're not really playing 14-year-olds on the other team. They're playing kids born January, February, and March. And their team themselves is 50% January, February, March. So what you see when these games go on is the kids look alike. They're the same build. I believe artificial turf, these turf fields that are all over the place, create a more bouncing ball, which means that the players need to be second ball picker-uppers or people who win second balls, which tend to be lanky, rangy, players. So now these players are starting to look alike. The pressure always comes at the same speed, always fast, right? And that's what these kids are really learning and being prepared for. When kids play free play, they'll get somebody they're playing against, somebody much older and better, who might play smart defense. They'll get a 9-year-old kid who just charges at him full speed like he's, like he just saw a donut. They'll get a wide range of pressures, a wide range of experience. As Deb said, they'll be leaders on the field. They'll sort of have to figure out, I'm the oldest, I better figure it out. I better get organized quickly. Or I'm the youngest, I should listen and watch. This wide variance of what we call overload, like when you're taking a challenge that's higher than you, like you're taking on an adult, or underload when you're trying to beat an 8-year-old off the dribble, or a combination play. This wide variance creates this giant canvas of learning that then they're able to use. And I would argue that when you go, say, let's just pretend that one kid might go pro one day, that when they get to these pro teams, what they'll find is a wide variance of abilities. Slower but smarter, faster but less technical. It'll be a very wide range within that sort of specific set, and that they all don't look the same. They're all not built the same. The pressure doesn't always come the same. So I don't believe that elite sports, especially in soccer and especially in boys soccer in the United States, prepares the kids very well for what lays ahead.
And I think you're right, because it's conceptualized on an industrial revolution model, reductionist model of let's try and produce or manufacture individuals that are the same. It's about conformity. It's about consistency to a technical norm. It's about, and the idea is that their thinking is that we need more and more people with the core, what they call the core skills. What that breeds, in my opinion, is averageness. So you've got hundreds of thousands of average and very few exceptional, because everybody has been designed to be conformed to a particular technical norm. which somebody conceived of based on, and what we'll know is that the game tomorrow will be different from the game of yesterday.
Yeah.
And the greatest ability that any young person can ever develop in a game context, if anything, is the ability to learn rapidly and adapt. And conformist models of development rob them of that. Because it's all nice and neat and tidy and in rows and norms and all those sorts of things. And so the very thing that they're aiming for, they think they're trying to get, they're actually working against. And in so doing, they're also actively working against what Debbie has quite rightly pointed out should be enshrined as a human right. I spent a little bit of time on the sideline. My son was at a county training session. I have to bite my lip watching the stuff that happens. And I was talking to one of the parents, and one of the boys, he's 11, and he's only just started playing field hockey because he's been involved in football. And he's been in a Premiership academy. The pre-academy. So he's been there since he was 6, travelling 3-hour round trips to get there, to come back, getting home at 10:30 from the age of 6. 20 hours a week of football. He's been let go by one academy, went to another academy, been let go by another academy, now playing in what's called the Junior Premier League, travelling again significant distances to play matches all over the country. Parents are committed. And I said to this mother who's next to me, are you not worried about the long-term implications and the burnout? Well, he really enjoys it. And I couldn't say this, but I really wanted to say, compared to what?
Yeah.
Compared to what? That's all he's ever had. So of course he's going to enjoy that. I mean, he's not particularly academic. He doesn't really like school. He'd much rather be doing this. Well, of course he would. Of course he would. But what if we could just give him an opportunity to play with his friends? But it's just not. The cultural dimensions of this are really quite challenging. And I guess it's one of the reasons why, as I guess we come towards the sort of conclusion of the conversation is, one of the reasons I have such huge admiration for the work you guys are doing. Because, clearly the passion comes through. Clearly your commitment to it comes through. But the fact that you every single day have to go up against this prevailing culture, which is essentially challenging it as being somehow, a bit avant-garde and a bit weird and all those sorts of things. When in reality, all we're trying to do is to tap into the authentic experiences that young people would try and bring for themselves. And that's now seen as weird. I mean, how you have the energy to do that, I really don't know. So I have huge admiration.
Well, Stu, just on that point, I have to say as well, one of my pet frustrations is the system that we've got, nobody is asked to justify. And yet if you come along and say, the power of play and allowing children to play choice, immediately you've got to justify everything that you're doing. Yet the system that we've got, what is the evidence that it works for anybody? Mark O'Sullivan quote, isn't there, about he's got a lovely way with words, but you throw a bag of eggs against the wall and one survives, and you say, look, the system works. And you ask anybody about selection and trialling and why we're playing best with best. I don't see any evidence. I've asked that question at quite a high level of the FA. I didn't really get an answer from it, apart from anecdotal experiences. So, there are questions to be asked whether you accept that there's any value to free play or think that there's a limited value. There are questions to be asked of all models, I think. And one of the most important things is to have the inquiring mind to ask those questions, the same inquiring mind that we want children to develop. And as when you're talking about that industrial model of schooling, it goes back to that Peter Gray idea of play and evolution of play and the purpose of play, and allowing children to develop those minds as people of the future. Whether it's sport or whether it's the workplace or whether it's citizens, we want people to have inquiring minds, to make decisions for themselves and to ask questions. That seems to me to be something which we can give them through sport as well.
Ted, some concluding thoughts from you?
Yeah, so I think hunter-gatherer societies, the kids, the boys, were not allowed to go hunting with the adults until they were 16. So what did they do? They played. And what did they play at? They played at hunting and building bow and arrows and, running through the forest. And they came up with new ideas that then when it was their time to be adults, they drove that clan forward. And this idea, play gives us new ideas. And I think that it builds, the important thing is the ability to adapt and to deal with the changing environment around us. And I really think it's a best practice model. The way I tell parents is like this acquisition or play period, there's 2 periods, and Deb's older boys are moving into that sort of second period. The way I see it is, when I've watched these kids, is the acquisition period is like a bank that we put money and we invest. And every time we tell kids to work, explicitly to work, or get focused or be persistent, we withdraw. And we believe that play, and I think there's some science to this, that the more everybody wants the adults to work hard, whatever it is, whether it's, and our job here, Joy the People, is not to develop kids, it's to help create healthy adults. That play as kids will allow us to work harder as adults. So there's some evidence, I believe, that those willing to do the hard work, deliberate practice, later in life have put in the more hours of unstructured play. So when kids shift from play to sort of ready to work, we want them to have we believe that they'll be ready to, get down and dirty and to be able to put in the hard work that's necessary to play, to succeed in life, whether it's soccer or anything else.
I think there's something really valuable there, and I've been thinking about that, and the dominance of the idea of deliberate practice and how that's become, quite a lot of people, I think, have used as a justification for earlier and earlier specialisation, has become pretty dominant. But even away from that, even really respected researchers such as Ted Kroeten, who I have enormous respect for, has sort of fallen into that trap because he came out with the idea of deliberate play. Well, for me, that's an oxymoron. You can't have deliberate play. It's not play if it's deliberate. Now you can, so I believe that there's a reconceptualization of the value of play. It doesn't have to be deliberate. What it can be, though, is play can be preparatory if you want it to be. So I talk about this idea of playperation because we're still playing, 100% playing. It's free play. It's absolutely playful. And it just so happens that playful experience can be preparatory if we need it to be. And so for some, it stays as being playful. For others, it becomes preparatory. And then we've got that lovely individualized model. And Debbie, just to wrap up on this, you said earlier about the big match and the 10v10. I wouldn't worry too much about that because once at the end of the season, the hockey season, I said to the kids, right, what are we going to do? And they went, the big match. I went, what? So we're going to do some 11 games? No, the big match. You adults against all us kids. 20 adults against 70 children of mixed age on one field. It was carnage. But everyone had an amazing time. So who am I to say? But I have to admit, playing this game, oh God, oh no, this is a health and safety nightmare. But nothing happened and everyone had a load of fun. So, and we actually created some rules that the really little ones, if they scored, they got 5 points. And so the bigger kids passed to the little ones to get 5 points to win the game for the kids. And that was the only extra rule we put in. Listen, guys, I'm going to have to catch a train, so I'm having to bring our conversation to a close, I'm afraid. But I absolutely, I can't tell you how valuable this conversation has been, and how appreciative I am of you taking the time to talk to me. It's been a brilliant refresher for me in terms of bringing back some of these components. I'm not saying I lost them. I just think it's always good to reconnect with, some of these ideas and some of these reconceptualizations, because we can, start getting trapped by those cultural dimensions of what's expected or what we expect of ourselves. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Pleasure. Absolute pleasure, Stu. Good to speak to you as well, Ted.
Yeah, so thanks, Stuart. Thanks, Debbie. Thanks, Joey. Great conversation. And I've learned so much. So got to get back to the play.
Come on, you ladies.
No, not a chance.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Talent Equation podcast. If you like the show, then please consider supporting it by leaving a review on your favorite podcast player, telling your friends about it, or even becoming a hero and show your appreciation by becoming a patron. Just head over to thetalentequation.co.uk and click on the Becoming a Patron button at the top of the page.